Chapter 13: The Russian Empire and the Soviet Union, Industrialization, Overcentralisation, and Sudden Collapse. The history of Russia, first as an absolutist empire and later as the Soviet Union, is often discussed in ideological terms: autocracy versus liberalism, communism versus capitalism, orthodoxy versus secularism. Yet behind these narratives lies a deeper structural pattern, a recurring mismatch between system complexity and the capability base available to operate it. Russia's political evolution, territorial expansion, industrialization, and eventual collapse follow the same physics that governed Rome, the Mongols, the Ottomans, and the British Empire. What makes the Russian case distinct is the speed with which its system swung from stagnation to hyper-centralized industrial modernity, and then to sudden disintegration. Russia built vast institutional machinery on an uncertain foundation of human capital, expanded that machinery far beyond its sustainable limits, and then saw it collapse when the capability shortfall became impossible to mask. The story begins with the late medieval Principality of Muscovy, which rose to prominence under Ivan III and Ivan IV through a combination of territorial expansion, centralized autocracy, and the subjugation of regional elites. Early Muscovite governance relied on a narrow ruling class, the Tsar, the boyars, and a small cadre of military servitors. The system had low administrative complexity relative to its size because the state ruled through coercion rather than bureaucratic integration. As the Russian Empire expanded eastward into Siberia and southward into the steppe, it incorporated large, sparsely populated territories that required minimal bureaucratic oversight. This early growth was possible because the system had not yet outgrown the capability base. The empire's administrative demands remained low compared to its landmass. The problem emerged as Russia began confronting European powers and modern state systems. By the 18th century, with the reforms of Peter the Great and Catherine II, Russia attempted to modernize its institutions by importing Western expertise, reorganizing the bureaucracy, and building a professional military and navy. Peter the Great literally imported capability. Dutch shipbuilders constructed Russia's first modern fleet, German officers trained the army, foreign engineers staffed state projects, and Russian nobles were sent abroad to learn navigation, metallurgy, and administration. This created a thin westernized elite layered on top of a largely pre-modern population. The state attempted to manufacture capability through education and coercive service obligations, but the depth was never sufficient. The empire developed a dual-track system, a small modern elite operating above a vast low-capability base. This produced short-term successes, territorial growth, military victories, cultural flourishing, but also extreme fragility. The imperial machine functioned only while the elite remained coherent. By the 19th century, Russia faced increasing pressure from both internal demographics and external competition. Serfdom suppressed productivity and limited workforce skill. Literacy remained low. The czarist bureaucracy was rigid, hierarchical, and filled through patronage rather than competence. This structural weakness was brutally exposed during the Russo-Japanese War, 1904 to 1905. Russia, a European great power, was defeated by a rising Asian state because of incompetent leadership, corrupt procurement, slow logistics, and disastrous coordination. The loss shocked the world. It proved that Russia's institutions could not operate modern military complexity. This failure was not tactical, it was structural. The 1917 revolutions were not simply ideological events but mechanical outcomes of a collapsing capability, complexity balance. World War I pushed the brittle system past its limits. The Russian state attempted to mobilize a modern war economy using pre-modern administrative tools. The result was chaos, food shortages, transport breakdowns, mutinies, and political implosion. The Bolsheviks triumphed not because they were more capable, but because the existing system had exhausted its ability to operate itself. The Soviet Union attempted to solve the capability deficit through hypercentralization and coercive mobilization. The regime believed it could substitute terror for competence. Early successes appeared impressive. The USSR industrialized rapidly. It defeated Nazi Germany. It built nuclear weapons. It launched the first satellite and human into space. But these achievements masked structural weakness. When capability was insufficient, fear filled the gap. Officials falsified reports to avoid punishment. Planning targets replaced real output. Reality became politically dangerous. The catastrophe of collectivization and the Holodomor famine in the 1930s reveals this perfectly. Grain quotas were set by planners who lacked agricultural knowledge. Local officials, terrified of punishment, reported fake harvest numbers. Grain was confiscated regardless of reality. Millions starved. This was not ideological malice alone, it was administrative incompetence amplified by fear. The system could not process truthful information, so it destroyed itself. The Soviet paradox deepened. As the economy modernized, complexity exploded. Central planners required accurate data, rapid feedback, and local initiative. Instead, the system punished honesty and rewarded conformity. Scientific capability flourished in narrow silos, physics, mathematics, weapons engineering, but governance capability stagnated. The USSR produced brilliant scientists and disastrous managers. A state with world-class rockets could not run grocery supply chains. By the 1970s and 1980s, the Soviet Union was a high-complexity industrial society run by a mid-capability bureaucracy. The system survived only through informal corruption networks. Targets were faked. Procurement became a farce. Military production wasted enormous resources. Standards were unofficially lowered everywhere just to keep the machine moving. The Chernobyl disaster, 1986, exposed the system's true condition. Engineers ignored safety protocols. Managers suppressed warnings. Evacuations were delayed. Information was concealed. The reactor exploded not because of technical limits but because institutional decay made competent action impossible. Chernobyl was a microcosm of Soviet collapse, fear-based reporting, bureaucratic paralysis, and catastrophic failure. When Gorbachev introduced glasnost and perestroika, he unknowingly removed the coercive scaffolding that had held the system together. Suddenly the state required initiative, honesty, and competence from officials trained for decades to obey and conceal. The structure unraveled. Production collapsed. The union fractured. The military could not stabilize the system. In 1991, the Soviet Union disintegrated almost overnight. Post-Soviet Russia inherited hollow institutions. A narrow elite retained capability in intelligence, energy, and security sectors, but the broader administrative apparatus lacked cohesion. The 1990s further degraded institutional quality. Oligarchic networks replaced bureaucratic merit. Modern Russia stabilized as a regional power, not a superpower, a classic post-imperial contraction to a scale compatible with real capability. What distinguishes Russia is not outcome but volatility. The state oscillated between stagnation and hypercentralization, coercion and collapse. Each time, it attempted to solve capability shortages with force rather than institutional development. Each time, it expanded complexity beyond what its population could sustain. Each time, the system failed. The Russian-Soviet arc confirms the core law. Empires rise when capability exceeds system demands. They decline when complexity outruns human capital. They compensate with coercion or lowered standards. Those responses delay collapse, and guarantee it. The Soviet collapse in 1991 was not a mystery. It was the structural correction of an unsustainable system. In the next chapter, we turn to modern nation-states, beginning with the United States, to show how the same capability, complexity trap operates even in the most advanced societies.